I had been at a very limited primary school. I had no biology teaching at all. I went to 10, and I'd always been interested in trees, and my father had always encouraged that. And he used to take us out for walks in the Chilterns on Sunday afternoon. I used to collect a wood, and I had 50 of them in my workshop, where now little specimens, all labelled, and they're still there from those days. And that led me into it. The point that I had picked up, and why you've contacted me, I think, was the reference to the trees on the site. Now, those were planted just before the war. When I went there in 1937, they were all very young. Now, the sensible thing was they'd been labelled, and I like trees, and I learnt a lot from the labels. I don't know if they still hadn't got named on them.
Some of them do, some of the trees.
I think they had only just been planted, as I remember them. I just remember them as quite young trees. But here were the names. That was very important.
Did it have the Latin name?
That I can't remember. I can't remember that, I'm afraid. I just know that I knew some, but there were others were new to me. That was quite important. I don't think there were any lessons about it, but there were the names. And I think I'm right that Squirrel Hall, I'm pretty sure I'm right, originally had 4 sweet chestnut trees. When I went to school a few years ago, I think there were only 2.
Now,
the only one.
I think we said something like 300-400 years old.
Oh, they could easily be. They do. It isn't a native tree, but it was supposed to be introduced by the Romans. And they could well be. They are very long-lived trees. The story we had was that area was part of Hampstead Heath. I don't know if that's correct, but that they would have been planted on Hampstead Heath. I was only there 2 years. I went in 1937, autumn 1937, and then, of course, 1939. I got a memory of 1938, which is the Munich crisis. And what was the school going to do? And the school was going to go out to the farm at Royston. And some children were going to go, but my parents felt that the education wouldn't be good enough. And same as Sheila, and her mother sent her straight to Chilterns. I was evacuated down to Somerset and went to a couple of horrible prep schools where I learned nothing, except how to rub out my mistakes on the blackboard with my nose.
Held by the teacher.
Yeah. That was in the morning at that prep school. There was mentorship, and of course he'd shout in death. I never right, and me up the board and made me rub out my mistakes in my nose. And that after KAS. Then I went to another one, how Wickham, which wasn't much better. And finally, Sheila had gone on to the KAS. I was very close to Sheila. I knew her very well indeed. And we've met in the holidays, and she was always writing to me. And in the end, I persuaded them. I had no idea how expensive it was to send me to Chris, which was a great relief.
Well, it really interests me that you were at King Alfred for a relatively small but very important
2 years.
Formative time of your...
So, vital. The little prep school, I honestly believed that God lived on a cloud up in the sky. I remember looking out the bathroom window and thought, like, gee. And my parents, they had both left the church very traumatically as young people, and they were very upset about this. And they were looking for a school where there wouldn't be this religious background. I first went out to St. George's at Harpenden for a day, and they did actually offer me a place, and I wanted to go. And my parents looked into it, and it's a fairly ecclesiastical school, St. George's. And they turned it down on those grounds. And I have an aunt who was a headmistress of Organ School, and she recommended KAS. She was interested in progressive education, and I think she suggested KAS, which is wonderful.
It's always wonderful to hear about Old Alfredian in terms of the impact that for you a short time had on your...
Yes, it was only 2 years. The other person was tomorrow, woodwork. I mean, I was playing around a bit of wood as quite a small child and given tools and things like that. And they bought an old kitchen table for me so that I could chop up bits of wood on it in the nursery. My sister had the other end for her painting. So I got it all before I went there. But he was a very good teacher. And there's a bookcase just outside the door here, which I made there.
How wonderful that you learned that.
Yeah.
At that time, and that it's not only even going on to your career, but just at that time that was so important?
He was very important. See, in the afternoon, the first part of the afternoon, we did arts and crafting. There was weaving, there was painting, which I never got on with. And they were all in buildings to the left out towards the road from the library. There was weaving, there was leatherwork. I made a built-in leatherwork. I'm trying to find it for you. I can't find it. There was leatherwork, various other things, which I don't think I can remember. But I was mainly interested in the printing press for the woodwork. But to go back to the woodwork, Mr. Morris realised quite early on that I was keen and interested. And first of all, I meant the bookshelves which were outside. Then I had a challenge. He made me make a trestle. Now, a trestle is a piece along the top with legs like that. They're not only like that, they're like that, so that it's steady. I used to store my sailing dinghy on it in the winter, those sort of thing. Now, the point is that's a double angle, so not easy. And when he got me on that really was quite a challenge. I haven't got them now, but I kept them for ages.
So did he set you that challenge and you had to solve it yourself?
Yes. How much he helped, I can't remember. But it was a geometrical challenge before actually cutting the wood. But see, the thing about that school was you go back on Saturday morning, and he was the caretaker. You could go to him on Saturday morning and say, "Can I have the key to the workshop?" There was no mechanical machinery. It was all hand tool. And we would like to go in there. And then he'd probably come over during the morning just to see it all was well. But it was all hand tools. There was nothing dangerous in it. And it was the feeling that you were part of the community. We really were part of a community. Yes, amazing. Now, have I mentioned all the style? There was Miss Bullock, tall friend, very tall. She always wore a blue tweed suit, and I found her rather distant. But then I found French difficult, so that was probably my fault.
But you still remember the teachers?
Oh, absolutely. Miss Hart, then French was next. And then I did always Monty next, and then French was further along. There were 3 or 4 classrooms along there.
Were you involved in actually doing the magazine, the school magazine?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The illustrations were made in the art room in lino cuts, and we set the type, or if it's illustration, we put those in a sort of square box in the... Yes, if we wanted to go in and work on Saturday mornings, we did. And Mr. Burkitt took on outside work too. If a local choir or something's putting on a concert, they'd get him to print the... And that was actually super. And I don't think you were paid. I'm sure we weren't paid. I just liked going in and doing it, getting actually covered with printing ink. I'm pretty sure he didn't teach. Yes, it was great fun. He covered the printing ink.
Did they call it choice on a Wednesday afternoon, or was it called something different?
Now, the word choice is not familiar to me. I think I'm right that every afternoon after lunch we did something like that. And then later on in the afternoon, there was ordinary lessons again. I think it was the pattern. Rather than games, I don't remember much about games. Mainly, we chose what craft we wanted to do after lunch. And I would have usually done woodwork. Some of them would do art was popular. There was music. I made a little flute once, but I wasn't very musical. That was at school. I'm trying to find it this morning. It's here somewhere. I couldn't find it. It was just a little bamboo flute, a recorder, not a flute. Yes. Have I mentioned all the stuff? Mr. Shepherd taught maths. He taught them. The other thing about Mr. Shepherd, with red flannel, he carved the joint at lunch in the large gymnasium on the left, or hall on the left. And when we had beef, it was very rare beef, and Sheila Bathurst had named everybody and everything. She called these slices of horribly red meat red flannel. And Mr. Shepherd carved the red flannel, which we hated. We both went on to vegetarian school. Yes. And that was Mr. Shepherd, yes.
How were the meals organised then in the main hall for your lunch?
I just remember several large tables. And is there a platform up at the right-hand end? Yeah. He wasn't on the platform, but he was below the platform, and here he carved these large joints. I don't think every day. I think it was, I'm going to say Friday. It couldn't have been Friday, could it? It wouldn't. I can't remember that. But I know he carved what she called red flower, which we didn't like. I've got to be careful not to muddle things with Chris because it was very similar. And several of us went on. 3 of us from my year went on. A girl we called Mousy because we couldn't pronounce her name, and she was a Russian emigre, Marusa or something. And we were all in the same class, and the 2 of them went straight on. I went to a couple of prep schools before going there. So when I landed up there, I was a year down compared with them because I'd done nothing. Yes, Mousy. We never understood her background. She was very embarrassed to talk about it. All I know is she'd escaped from something in Europe. This would be before the war, well before the war. It was something to do with Russia. Whether she was actually Russian or not, I don't know. And I have no idea what happened to her. But she came on to Chris. But even there, she was very reluctant. She wouldn't talk about her background at all. So something nasty happened, I think. Those were the 3 of us who went on. One of the girls, she was also a refugee. I think I've got her name and address here because I have a correspondence from her. She went out to Fintwall Farm, and my parents wouldn't let me go. They thought the education would be good. But she did very well indeed. And she contacted me, about 10, 15 years ago, having become, I think, a doctor and had done very well out in the States. And then was coming back to live near Cambridge. And eventually, death was announced in the KS. Now, she was Yvonne Wells. Her maiden name was Lohmann, so she obviously was a European refugee. Yeah. Yes, and one of the things she said to me in these correspondence was that when she came to school, she was teased by Sheila because she had very spotty hair. And at first, she didn't like it. And then she realized that this was a sort of way of bringing her in. She had a nickname. We all have nicknames. Mine was Esmondika. This girl, Sheila Bathurst, inventing it for everyone. And she was spottiferous or something. She didn't like it. But she was obviously a European refugee from that maiden name. Yes. But I'm afraid she died a few years ago now.
So Edmundina, that was your...
Esmondika.
Edmundi.
I did the word. She called
Is she still alive?
Yeah. I wrote an obituary for her in full magazine and was able to get a very nice photograph of her. She had wonderful red hair. Do you know anything about King Alfred Came to Tea?
No. Go him.
Again, this girl Sheila, she wrote a play. King Alfred, or I think it was When King Alfred Came to Tea. I can find the details, I think. I've got all the text, but I've got the correct name and the date.
And did you all perform on the play?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember. I don't remember what happened to it. I just remember the name, King Alfred Came to Tea again. She was very inventive. His wife and just fine. Here we are. I enclosed 2 copies of King Alfred Came to Tea. Now, what about them?
How wonderful.
I think Sheila wrote it, is that right?
They must have done this. 1973. That was performed again at the lower school open day in 1973.
She was a school governor by then. She had her own girls at the school, and she was a governor, and I know she was responsible for the library. That's Sheila again. So that's when it was performed, but she wrote it while we were at school.
Yeah, I'm sure she did.
I think probably. I am right that Sheila wrote it. Am I? Does it say there?
Yeah, because we got a letter from Phil Stanley. I was greatly cheered by a letter written on behalf of my old former Phil, Sheila Bathurst, who I remember well. So Sullivan was her married name.
Yes.
And then her daughters came to the school.
Yes. I think there were 2 or 3 of them. They were all red-haired because she married a red-haired man. I remember Sheila telling me she got a very wide knowledge of science, even though she wasn't a scientist. With both parents red, you got a very metallic colour. And they were, or are. I last met them at her memorial, which was held at Calias.
What? She was incredibly involved as a council member then.
She was a parent governor. That would be on the council with it, yes. That's the last time I saw her. And she had a cartoon drawn by Damien Parson. When we were at the Royston camp before the war, there was a wood behind the campsite. And one afternoon, a group of us wandered off, led by Sheila, who led everything, in her shawls. And we got lost in this wood. We couldn't find our way back to the camp. And Damien drew a lovely picture of King Alfred School in darkest Africa. And this is, here we're walking through a wood, and there are lions and tigers and snakes and all these things. Now, she kept this cartoon, and the last time I saw her, when she was living up Apple, there it was on the kitchen, So it must still have one of her daughters when they got it. She wanted to trade it. King Alfred School in darkest Africa. It's a cartoon.
And it was done as a result of that afternoon.
Yes, we got lost in the wood. And Damien was, he was an artist, quite an artist. Damien Parsons, that's where I last saw, and that's where she died. Yeah. Now, what I was going to mention was the sailing on the Welsh Harp.
You still do it today.
Would you contact me? There was no sailing allowed on the Welsh Harp before the war, but my route to school on the bus, which still is on the same route, I saw it recently, went along from Wembley, along the north side of the road, past on the north side, and my father, who was a doctor, the reservoir keeper was one of his patients. Now, when I came out of the Navy after the war, I bought a dinghy and got permission to put it on the Welsh Harp through father. And I was sailing there one day, and somebody suddenly turned up from London University Sailing Club, not KS, asking how I'd got permission, and I explained. From there on, London University did, and then you did as well. And it was purely because father had the contacts. I don't think we asked any higher authority. And I held that dinghy there for several years, and somebody noticed it in Kedron. When I came ashore, they wanted to know how I'd got permission. And that led to London University going there. And then I think KS as well, because KS built special sailing dinghies once.
Yeah. So we still have those.
Have you?
They were designed by the designer, but then built by the student in the equivalent of woodwork and technology centre.
I read about that with great in. I sailed all my life. I had all sorts of different boats. And I just sold my last boat. My son, he used to have to come with me because I didn't go up on the foredeck. I'm not steady enough now. It's quite a big boat. And he said, Dad, you've got to sell it. This was during the pandemic. I said, wait for it. No, he said, I'm not going with you again. So I said, what's the problem? He said, if you fall over, I couldn't get you in again. I said, I'm not going to fall over. You got up on the foredeck. I stayed in the cockpit. I'm not going to fall over. Wait, we sold the boat. And I gave him the money, and he bought an electric car as a result. So that was good use of money. Yes, good.
Do you miss it, Audrey? What did you love about?
Oh, it's very interesting. When I was working very hard in the Forestry Commission, I remember feeling it was the best way to relax because you're doing something medically which is quite different. You're also physically occupied. I remember thinking a lot about this and how the Saturday afternoon sailing was the best way to relax because I was teaching in the forest quite a long time. A bit of a struggle, and it was relaxation to go sailing. But I hope I passed on a lot of what I learned at KS and at Chris to these students, because we were training our own junior staff in the commission. The graduates, with senior people, we went in at a senior level. And my first two jobs, I was training quite unsuitable. It should have been much more stress than me. And the relationship between the staff and the student, I thought, was absolutely appalling, and tried to break the barriers down. And eventually I was put in charge of the largest of the commission schools. And I took over from a man who'd done a very good job educationally, but the relationship with the students was just appalling. I used to say to them in my introductory talk, you're no different to us. We're just older. But that wasn't the attitude. Eventually, the Forestry Commission closed the schools down. Actually, at my recommendation, they weren't doing a very good job. But school background was very important to the attitude of the students.
I guess that's an influence of Canada.
Absolutely, yes. We had second school I was at in Perthshire, very bad relationship. But all the staff lived on site. We had a little house on the same estate. And my wife and I started doing what we did at university, because I met her at university. We'd had tea with off and Sunday afternoons we started that. My boss was so jealous. And we had 2 little girls. They just loved playing with the children. And I wasn't very popular with the rest of the staff. If I was doing what I'd had at school, trying to break the barriers down.
Yeah.
This is probably different now. But I'm talking about the 1950s, 60s. I was teaching in the commission. 3 of my children were school teachers. Only one of them is now teaching. The other 2 have retired. One was a head mistress. But Geoffrey, the youngest, he's still teaching here in Woodbridge. And I would say it's very different to what it was in the 1920s, 1930s. Very different. My son's very good with people. But if we meet one of his pupils in Woodbridge, we chat through it in a way that wouldn't have happened in the past.
Yeah. If you remember, the King Alfred School Society was always to influence education beyond.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know that. That was one of the objectives, I imagine.
Now, then tell me a little bit about what you did after school. Tell me about your career.
I was planning to go into forestry. What actually happened was my father was a very busy doctor during the war in London. Occasionally, they slipped out to a pub in Wickham for Saturday night, and he went for a walk up in the Chilterns on Sunday morning. I wasn't with him. And he'd been in Canada before the First World War, working in farming as a very young lad, and he met some Canadians felling beech trees. The Canadians were over here felling big timber, and this was sent down to a sawmill in Gloucestershire, making a mosquito aircraft. Anyway, he talked to these people, and this time I saw him, he said to me, "Have you ever thought of forestry?" And it was because he trusted to these, and it matched biology and geography. It just matched. Now, the geography master was older than the others. He was an extremely nice man. My parents knew him well. Now, he was called Oscar Backhouse of Tris. And he took this up. And he found out a little bit about forestry for me. And then, chance meeting, he used to take boys up to Snowdonia near rock climbing. And we went up to Ogwen. This was middle of the war. We stayed in Ogwen Cottage, and he took us rock climbing and things. And he knew that I was interested in forestry. And there was somebody staying there who was a forest on overseas leave who was climbing. He'd been at Bangor and taken a forestry degree before the war. He was there for a holiday climbing on his own. And the geography master, Oscar Backhouse, discovered this. And so he got the chap to talk to me. And he said, "It's no good sitting here, cheating, grow outside, wind grow outside. And there's a little plantation of conifers near Ogwen Cottage." And he took me in there and he talked to me all about the trees and what happened and how they would be managed. And I was intrigued. I was hooked. So it hooked. And the geography master supported this. And he got me a book on British forestry, which there were very few then. And we found I wouldn't be good enough to go to Oxford, which is the we've got a forestry degree in England. But I got my degree at Bangor in North Wales, which was a forestry degree, but they didn't require Latin entry, which Oxford did. But this was all planned at school, but then, of course, I was called up at the end of the war. And I went into the Navy, and I was in the Navy for about 2 years. I didn't go to sea till after the war. And when we were being demobbed, there was a scheme where you were given career guidance. And there was a scheme for ex-servicemen if you had applied during the war. I had. I got in touch with Bangor. They said, yes, come for an interview. And so they interviewed me. And I went to Bangor. And it was a joint degree, forestry and botany. And then I went on to Oxford and did a forestry research at NSC at Oxford. And then I went into Forestry Commission. It wasn't easy to fit into the Forestry Commission. And I was lucky to get in. But I made a bad mistake. I was interviewed and things were going well for the commission. And they said, where would you like to go if you're posted? I said South East England or something. And then they said, now, if you don't get an appointment, what are you going to do? So I said, I would go back to my idea of school teaching. What about teaching in Forestry Commission? So I said, no, I want 10 years experience. Factual. Then, okay. Of course, what they do, I got the appointment, they posted me straight into teaching with no few. And then I was moved to another school as the number 2. Then the man was seriously ill, and I ran the 3 months. And then they offered to promote me in charge of the school in Norfolk Hills. And it'd been early promotion. I said, no, I've got no field experience. I am not going. So I went into the field in Wales for about 10 years, and then I did eventually go in charge of that school. So that was basic career. And 2 jobs in Scotland, and then I went down to Wales. It was involving young people in the countryside, particularly through trees.
And the reality is nowadays that's so relevant.
Yeah.
It's so relevant for young people as well. Not everyone's suited to university, and it's not what they necessarily would love doing. I think
No.
it's one of those things. Did you love what you did?
Yes, absolutely. And I think people realise they must come over. One of my students from Perthshire days, he eventually became a forester in charge of the Lake District. He went off and trained as a landscape architect, actually, and he wrote a book about his career. And very kindly sent me a copy. And he'd written about my teaching when he was a student at Fascination. And I think that's basically what he said. It's only a couple of paragraphs. But it's rather nice to see that's what came over. Now, I put a lot of that down to school. Home as well, but school too.